Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're digging into a major scientific study that gets right to a question I think we've all wondered about. When it comes to living a long, healthy life, does it really matter where our protein comes from?
Okay, let's just jump right in. With all the conflicting diet advice out there, one day you hear one thing, the next day you hear the opposite, we're all just looking for some clear answers. And this study, well, it might be one of the best we've got. So this huge study was published in JAMA Internal Medicine, and it gives us one of the clearest answers we've ever seen. Let's not waste any time, let's get right to the main finding.
So here's the bottom line, right up front. Yes, it absolutely matters where your protein comes from. According to this research, people who ate more plant protein had a significantly lower risk of dying overall, and especially from things like heart disease.
But before we get any deeper into the what, let's talk for a second about the who and the how long, because the sheer scale of this research is what makes its findings so incredibly powerful.
Yeah, this was no small-time trial. We're talking about researchers following over 400,000 people. That gives their data a ton of statistical power.
And this wasn't just a quick snapshot either. They tracked these folks for 16 years. You really need that kind of long-term view to see the real connections between diet and how long people live.
Over that time, they were able to analyze nearly 78,000 deaths. That's what allowed them to connect the dots between what people were eating day to day and the ultimate health outcomes. It's what gives these conclusions some serious teeth.
All right, so you've got all this data from all these people over all this time. What did the researchers actually find? Well, the patterns that emerged are pretty striking.
The researchers themselves drew a really strong conclusion here. They're basically saying that this evidence is good enough to actually make public health recommendations. So this isn't just an interesting finding, it's a potential call to action.
And this slide just lays it out so clearly. On the one hand, eating more plant protein was directly linked to a lower risk of death. But on the other hand, after they adjusted for all the other lifestyle factors, just eating more animal protein, well, it didn't show that same protective benefit. The real advantage was clearly on the plant side of the equation.
But maybe the most fascinating part of this whole study wasn't just about eating more plants. It was about what happens when you make one tiny little swap. And this is where the science gets really practical for all of us.
Get this, just swapping a tiny 3% of your daily calories from an animal protein to a plant protein was linked to a 10% drop in mortality risk. I mean, think about that. That is a remarkably small change for such a huge potential payoff.
And if you look at which proteins get swapped, the numbers get even crazier. Swapping out just 3% of calories from egg protein for a plant source was linked to a staggering 22.5% lower risk of death. Swapping red meat showed about a 14% reduction. These are not small numbers we're talking about.
Okay, so a 3% energy swap. That sounds kind of abstract and sciencey, right? What does it actually look like on your plate? Well, it's way, way simpler than you might think. We are not talking about a complete dietary revolution here. It could be as simple as using lentils in your pasta sauce instead of ground beef for one meal. Or maybe treating your usual morning eggs for a handful of nuts and seeds. What's really interesting is that the study pointed out that even plant proteins from common foods like bread, cereal, and pasta were effective in these swaps. That makes this super accessible for pretty much everyone.
So the big takeaway here really isn't about some radical all-or-nothing diet overhaul. It's about the incredible cumulative power of small, intentional choices that you make every single day. The data really suggests that consistency with these little changes is what matters most for your health in the long run.
It's a pretty powerful thought to end on, isn't it? The idea that improving our health and longevity might not require massive sacrifices, but instead just a series of small, mindful swaps. And this study, it suggests that might just be the case.